Come on in, everybody. Hope you're all doing all right on this Friday afternoon. Let me know if you can hear that music, if it's too loud. Might be a little too loud. Let me turn it down a little bit. I am Justin. I'm with the Tennessee Holler, and it's nice to be back on here. Haven't done this in a while. Various reasons. Had family here, had kids with COVID, all that. But now I got a little time, and I thought I would jump on here and kind of go through the Holler email that we send out twice a week. We've been doing this pretty regularly, where we just kind of go through some of the stories of the day, hear your thoughts on them, share some of mine. And I also have somebody coming on here in a little bit who's going to talk to us about something that she's going through. You don't hear music, but you don't want to hear music anyway. All right, music's off. It's in my ears. It's not in yours. All right, good. No music. Thank you. Ironing out the kinks here. So before I get started, I just want everybody to know we're at tnholler.com, at the TN Holler on Twitter and Facebook. We have all these hollers throughout the state. That's all thanks to your support. Really, really appreciate all the support you guys have given us. Chip in a few bucks a month goes a long way. Make it $10 a month or more, and you get one of these sweet holler hats like this dog has. Really, I can't thank you guys enough for how supportive you've been. It's been awesome. It's been quite a year. I'm not going to play it right here, but I do want you to know that we have just put out our year in review Holler video. It's about 4 minutes long. It's at the top of our Twitter feed. Really just kind of goes to show how much happened this year. I mean, it's been a wild year. When we were putting that together, our first draft, our first cut of it was like a half hour long. And we cut it down to 4 minutes. I mean, there's just been so much stuff. It's been such a wild year. You forget how much stuff happened this year. Hey, Jennifer, how are you? Good to see you. It's been such a crazy year. And that Holler video really showed kind of how much stuff has happened. And I honestly don't anticipate it slowing down anytime soon. You know, it's just like drinking from a fire hose around here. Just kind of going through the email that we sent out today, which if you're not subscribed, tnholler.com is where you can subscribe and get that email. The cover of it is this DA to look at Lee's no bid spree. This is a story that I think probably has some real legs. Basically, Governor Lee, over the course of the pandemic, used the emergency powers to hand out no bid contracts to a lot of companies that were politically connected to him. A lot of them had zero experience in what we were giving them money to do. I think you probably remember that sock mask fiasco where we gave millions of dollars to a company to make masks that we gave out for free. And the masks were like porous sock material. They also had some sort of pesticide on them. So there were about 5 instances of that. Another one was like 75 million for contact tracing to a company that didn't even do that. Just wild stuff. And so Senator Heidi Campbell asked the Nashville DA to look into that. And it sounds like he's going to. So he's going to now look into these no bid contracts. And it seems like Senator Campbell is not the only one who is sounding the alarm about this. You see Nashville DA Glenn Funk will be auditing the no bid contract. But then here's this outlet, Tennessee Conservative News, picking up the story. So, it's not just Democrats that are interested in this. There are seemingly conservatives who, maybe understand that spending our money on political connections and giving it to inexperienced companies is not a conservative principle. So Tennessee conservatives seem to be concerned about that also. And that's clearly something that has some legs here. Another story in the top of our headline, and one I actually have a video for. Let's see. Gloria Johnson is on with us. She says the cattle insemination gloves are the most ridiculous. those were pretty ridiculous. And then Hunter Dempster over in Memphis says, I just found one of those hole-ridden no-bid masks in my car yesterday. Well, good. At least somebody still has one. So that's the masks thing. And then, on that note, speaking of handing out no-bid contracts, big story this week was about Tennessee Education Department Commissioner Penny Schwinn, who herself has signed contracts with companies that have a conflict of interest. Her husband works at a company called TNTP. It's not his company, but he works there. They picked him up after he got fired, I think, or let go, terminated by a Nashville charter school. And they just approved another $8 million to this company to teach teachers to teach kids to read. And that's now $16 million going to a company that Penny Schwinn's husband works for. So the conflict of interest is glaring. And in a story by TC Weber this week, he pointed out that they say, oh no, other companies bid on that. That wasn't a no bid contract. At least one other company bid on it. Well, the reporting is that it's one other company that may have bid on it. And the detail that TC points out, which is really a tell, I think, is that the request for proposal, so the government asking for companies to bid on this contract, went out on Christmas Eve and lasted for a week over Christmas break, and then they closed it the first week of the new year. So what company is going to be able to throw together a proposal over a Christmas holiday? Not many. So, they say it was a bidding, situation, but they seem to have set it up so that this company, were the ones to have gotten it. And so let's go ahead and watch. This was, again, Senator Heidi Campbell bringing this up. This was not the first time she brought it up, but this was this week, bringing it up to the Tennessee Education Department when they came before one of the committees this week. And this was the exchange that they had.
We've had discussions about conflicts of interest, things like that.
The contract was originally procured through a competitive request for proposal process.
100 districts sent teachers to attend the training, but there are district pleads daily wanting to send the next round of teachers.
Do we have any data or documentation to show that the students are actually benefiting?
So they say, oh yeah, the teachers all love this. Everybody loves this program. Well, Senator Gilmore's like, what data do you have to show us that this is working as we spend another $8 million on it? Like, where is this coming from? Other than just you telling us that teachers are saying, yeah, it's going great. And she doesn't have a good answer.
Or improving as a result of the training, other than just the teachers saying yes.
We don't have student data yet because we don't have TN Ready data to show the pre and the post. We have anecdotal data showing that when we do classroom walks, and I was in 3 classrooms last week, and when you see the tutoring sessions taking place and children are learning to recognize words based on decoding.
Okay, so again, this is not about, the way that the kids are taught to read. It may be a perfectly valid way to teach kids to read, it may be working, but the optics of Penny Schwinn's signature going on a contract with a company that hired her husband after he was terminated from a charter school. I mean, you can't ignore that. You just can't. And add to that the fact that she has been, and I don't have the headline for you right here, but just you're going to have to take my word for it. Conflict of interest is sort of her thing. Like, that happened in her last job in Dallas. She was also like getting paid by a California company while she's been here in Tennessee, some charter school there. So, follow the money, to put it mildly, when it comes to Penny Schwinn and what's going on there.
You can see it in a qualitative way.
The moment that we've got some data, that's something that we are going to be eagerly sharing with the entire General Assembly.
The original contract was $8 million for 1 year.
$8,064,000.
8,000 teachers have already taken this course this past year. Is that correct? A population of how many?
Actually, over 10,000. I'm not sure if we have the entire population in terms of the percentage.
We're going to proportionally see a reduction. The teachers that have wanted it, taken the course.
We are expecting around the same number of participants.
We're teaching them why, and now we're teaching them how.
So, you get the point. They go on to talk about why, it's going to be 10,000 teachers again. Got to have that $8 million. It's not, can't drop that number at all. It's got to be 8 million again, and you can't ignore the optics. There's no reason to give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to this stuff. This is the Lee administration. You've seen what he did with the whole mask, the sock masks, and the contact tracing, and firing, our top vaccine expert who has questions herself about a lot of this stuff. I highly recommend TC's article about it. In fact, maybe we'll repost it on our site so you guys can check it out. But he goes into detail about this stuff. And again, this is not the time to be giving anybody the benefit of the doubt. And the investigation into Lee's no bid contracts, this is all sort of cut from the same cloth, so to speak. The third headline that we had in the top of our email was about Representative Bruce Griffey, who is one of the more extreme Republican legislators. He's actually somebody that when I go up there to talk to them, he talks to me. Like, he's one of the ones that's not afraid to talk. He's one of the ones that I think actually genuinely believes the stuff that comes out of his mouth and the things that he carries and votes for. His latest is an attack on kids. It's an attack on undocumented kids. He has a bill to stop funding education for undocumented kids. So he doesn't want undocumented kids to be able to go to school here in America, which they can, because, we try to take care of kids. It's not the kids to be punished for anything that their parents have done, and that's the kind of country that we've decided we have. It's in the Constitution that we educate the people who are here. And it was a Supreme Court case. It was a Supreme Court case called Plyler versus Doe, and it was decided 5-4. And so I emailed Bruce Griffey and I said, have you heard of that Supreme Court case? And this was his response. He said, read the dissent. I drafted this bill to directly challenge Plyler versus Doe and what I believe is yet another unconstitutional decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. The only way to legally challenge it is to pass legislation that directly conflicts with it. So he's telling us that, yes, he has heard of the Supreme Court case, and his entire goal with introducing this legislation at the state level is to have it go all the way up to the Supreme Court and challenge to make sure that kids don't get educated. I mean, he's retiring, so he's not running again. And apparently he wants his legacy to be that he made sure kids can't get educated. I mean, it's hard to understand where they're coming from unless, you just assume that he's against brown kids, I guess. You take it for what you will. I actually responded to that email that he sent us, and I asked him, when did the Griffeys get here? Were the Griffeys Native Americans? Did they come over at some point? What was the immigration situation then? Personally, my grandparents came here from Europe after World War II, after surviving the Holocaust. And, I wouldn't be here if not for that. And so this whole thing where, we close the door behind us once we get here, yes, we're for legal immigration. And yes, we're for, borders, but we're not for punishing kids. And undocumented people are here. They contribute to society. They do pay taxes. And, this is not something that should be a priority. So I see somebody on here hammering us, throw out the race card. Yes. Why should we possibly think that race is involved here? It's not a race card. I mean, you guys, this is the same group of people that is protecting a KKK Grand Wizard bust in our Capitol, that just voted to not obscure the ugliest KKK Grand Wizard statue in America, which was designed by a guy who thinks slavery was a good thing, who defended in court the assassin of MLK. So, if you don't want people throwing out the race card, stop doing racist bullshit. And so it's hard to separate all of this stuff. And yes, we were going to throw out the race card. So that is just there. And I'm sorry if you don't like it, but it's there. And I'll tell you right now, another way, thank you for this segue, by the way, another way you might be able to get us to stop playing the race card, if that's really a concern of yours, is maybe have Republican candidates stop have KKK leaders stop running as Republicans for office. Like, I mean, why do they feel so comfortable running as Republicans? Why is that? Why would that be? Maybe it's because they feel pretty comfortable that their agenda is at times a racist agenda. I'm not saying every Republican is racist, but if you can go find me a white supremacist or a Klansman that's voting for Democrats these days, I will send you $100 personally. You are standing shoulder to shoulder with racists. You may not be one, but you certainly are standing shoulder to shoulder with them. And the Supreme Court decided this, and for a reason. It's not the kid's fault. And so, Griffey seems to be doing something that's going to hurt people here and not help people. And there are a lot more important things that could be going on. Just as a last thing about the statue that I mentioned, this was a funny tweet. I thought this was by @MNate Shyamalan. He said, today they took down the Nathan Bedford statue in Nashville, which famously sucks so much ass that it accidentally disproves white supremacy. I thought that was pretty good. And it sort of fell apart when they took it down. Another way you could avoid getting the race card played, my friend, is if you stop purging black Democrats from county election boards like they're doing in Georgia, where they just purged black Democrats from county election boards. And after their new Jim Crow law passed, and now they are canceling Sunday voting because Sunday voting was a big voting day for black people. So they're canceling Sunday voting with an all-white election board after purging black Democrats from county election boards. But you don't want us to play the race card, right? Yeah, that's no good. Okay. Fair enough. But the evidence is mounting here, as you can all see. And it's hard to ignore it. It's just hard to ignore it. I don't get any joy out of saying this stuff. It's just really hard to ignore the evidence here. And that's why when you look at the legislature is entirely white on the Republican side, except for Rep. Kumar here in Tennessee. At the national level, it's mostly white. Your voting bloc is mostly white. So, I mean, people kind of understand what's happening here. I'm not, breaking any news. And what are you saying? Maybe it's because they're D and not because they're black. I mean, sure. But, what's going on here is very clearly affecting minorities and black people most. And that's why we had the Voting Rights Act, which needs to be restored. I mean, your whole thing that racism isn't a thing, like, nobody's buying that. So I appreciate you coming on here and having this exchange, but that kind of gaslighting, that's not going to play here. I'm sorry. A couple more things, and then I'm going to bring in somebody who's here to talk to us about something that she's going through. Excuse me. We talked about the no bid. We talked about the conflict of Schwinn. And then there are, speaking of bigotry, there's also a lot of bullying that goes on here in our state, and especially anti-LGBT bullying at the legislative level. And, that kind of resonates with other adults that aren't legislators, and it eventually affects our kids. And so I wanted to at least mention the story that happened in Bedford County. Young kid named Elijah killed himself, a gay 12-year-old who was bullied by evangelical kids at his school. He told him he was going to hell, and he killed himself. And that's a story that isn't getting a ton of play right now, but I wanted to at least mention it because, bullying has consequences, and we see very real impact. And this is a kid who, is gone and not coming back. And so, that's Elijah in Bedford County. And, every session we see more of these anti-LGBT bills. They call it the slate of hate. They especially attack trans people. And it's just bullying. I mean, that's the bottom line of all this stuff. That's the thing that really pisses me off more than anything else, is bullying. And so, I wanted to at least mention that. And so everybody is aware that these things really do matter. All right, my friend Theron is here to talk to us about something that she's going through. Speaking of bullying, I guess that's a pretty good segue. Theron, how are you? You're in Memphis right now, right?
Yeah, I'm in Memphis in Shelby County or West Tennessee for those who divide up our state into grand divisions. This is where I'm at right now.
Okay. So today we're going to talk about something that happened to you. I mean, I guess I'd love for you to just tell us your story, but this involved Sonic in Memphis, right?
Yeah, it did. Almost a month ago today, so maybe about 31 days ago. You know, I think I'm like most folks, you know, we like a good beverage, like to quench our thirst in the middle of the day. And, you know, we've had some pretty warm weather here in the fall. And, you know, Sonic is a place you can drive up. It's pretty easy to access. And, you know, they brand themselves as having any happy hour, or it's always happy hour in their app. And, you know, I went just like I've normally done, you know, probably hundreds of times. But, you know, when I went on November 9th, it was just a different situation. And I had some trouble in the app. And, you know, technology can sometimes, you know, wear us down and let us down. And I said, okay, maybe it's a problem with the app. Could be an operator error. You know, let me check in with the people that are actually staffed there. And, you know, I went through pressing a little famous red button on the screen and asked a couple of questions, and I was trying to get some assistance. Ultimately, what happened is I couldn't get any assistance directly through the speaker, and so they sent out an individual. Individual comes out, kind of gave me a hard time. I show my receipt. It's like, hey, here's where I paid. You know, I just want to get my drinks and go. I was actually headed to a political event. You know, it's campaign season. You know, candidates are coming from everywhere. We've got some really big elections next year, and so I was coming through in passing. Ultimately, a gentleman whose name tag says Greg, you know, came out after the first guy and, you know, said he was just getting off his break. And he went to get the drinks. He came back. He asked for more money after handing me the drinks. And I think that's where it went even more left. I think there was some frustration, definitely, because there was a problem with the app. There were communication issues with the staff there, but all I just wanted was my $2 worth of drinks and be on about my way. What ultimately happened was the drinks were snatched from me by that employee, and then afterwards he reached inside of my car and punched me in the face. I ended up having to go to 2 healthcare providers, you know, a local healthcare provider in my neighborhood, and then I went to a hospital where I've previously gone for cancer care, where I'm familiar with doctors. You know, it's the ER I know about. It was probably about 6.5 hour wait time from start to finish, which is not a short time, but it's not as long as some other folks have waited. But ultimately, I came out with contusions and some soreness and bruising on the left side of my face. So, of course, I think I did what most people would do. And, you know, I talked to friends, what should I do? Where should I go from here? And everybody said, you know, talk to an attorney. Okay, let's go the legal route. So I definitely sought legal advice and, you know, got paperwork in order, and I had representation dealing with this. What I think some people don't know is that a friend who was concerned called that location blindly to see what happened. And the manager on staff admitted to it, but tried to paint the gentleman as just this nice family guy, which that could be true, maybe, but not if you punch a woman in the face. You know, we're talking about somebody that identifies as male punching a woman in her face. That's never okay. Certainly not over drinks, certainly not to do on the clock at your employer. And there's been some conversation between Sonic Corporation and my attorney, and the latest update is that now Sonic is denying it happened. They are denying that they have seen it on footage. They've only seen parts of what happened, and now they even went so far as to suggest that I hit myself in the face. Wow. I don't know that I would not do that. I don't know anybody that would go to Sonic for drinks that are less than $5 and expect it to lead to a punch in the face, and then have $1 billion corporation who made more in a pandemic year than most other people who are losing jobs, getting laid off, continuously not getting paid living wages. And now we're talking about a company that should be held liable for the actions of their employees that is trying to completely absolve themselves. And that's a challenge for me.
Right. What are you going to do? So just to, make sure we get it, you basically are saying an employee from Sonic in Memphis punched you in the face and you're not sure what to do now.
Yeah, I talked to an attorney, and my attorney made some calls to to the local store to try to reach the general manager, try to find out who the owner was. And the general manager gave us some tension, but the manager on duty at the time of the incident was apologetic and admitted to what happened, as did that employee, who was allowed to not only stay on the clock that day but report to work the next day. So now he's a liability. I was staged at the very front of Sonic, so anybody that's been to a Sonic knows pretty much the first half of it has glass windows that go all the way around. So I was sitting where I could see those windows, and anybody that was in there could see outside if they were looking. When my attorney asked if there were cameras, Sonic's response was, well, we don't have footage of him hitting her. Okay. And when asked about cameras again and said, well, how would my client hit themselves? Sonic's response was, well, maybe she hit herself.
Okay.
We don't have it on video, but we know that he snatched the drinks from her. Well, how do you know that part but not the other part of it?
Right. That's a valid question. Well, it seems like maybe they're picking up on this whole, they're trying to link you to Jussie or whatever. And, everybody's trying to claim that people fake things now. But if they saw him grab the drinks from you, clearly they're looking at something. So, maybe you can find a way to get your hands on that footage. But at the end of the day, it's just good that you're telling people that it happened.
Yeah, and that's my challenge is, I think in a world of social media, we have to be creative about ways that we inform people. And so my first instance was let me put up a Facebook post, let me warn other people in the event that somebody else goes to that particular Sonic and encounters that particular employee and he has another bad day, bad moment, spazzes out, and now another individual has been punched in the face. That's my concern, is that this time it's me, but who might it be another day? And it is absolutely disgusting for any corporation of any size, regardless of revenue base, not saying, hey, we're sorry. Not even so much as an apology, not even acknowledging what happened. It's, no, this person did it to themselves. And at this point, I have concerns about the validity of the footage. I have every reason to believe that they may have deleted the footage or manipulated the footage in some way, because they're attempting to completely absolve themselves of this. And it's absolutely disgusting to me that it seems a company of that size is bullying essentially the little person, not an elected official, not somebody of extreme notoriety, not a celebrity. It's just, I'm just a person who decides to go to Sonic and get drinks just like any other day, and they're not taking responsibility for their actions, and they're allowing an employee to remain there and not even suspend them, not even go through an investigation process. And so other people are at risk.
Okay, well, I'm glad you came on here and told us where exactly is that Sonic so people can avoid it.
Yeah, so the Sonic, for those who live in Memphis, the Sonic is at the corner of Poplar and Hollywood. It's probably one of the busiest Sonics in our city because it's relatively centrally located. Okay.
All right, Darren. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Keep us posted on how this goes. And, we've definitely seen you in some videos hollering at Governor Lee. So, keep doing that too.
Yeah, I try to keep people accountable. I just ask that it happens across the board. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Stay in touch. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Take care. All right. That's Darren with her story about Sonic in Memphis. I appreciate you guys joining us today. I got a couple more videos if you want to see them that I wanted to show you. I'm seeing your comments. Robert's asking about cash register order receipt with timestamp. That's a good question. I'll follow up with her about that. Christine, I think this is about the teaching certificate or the training that Penny Schwinn's husband's company is giving. No, the teachers have teaching certificates. I think it's just like a new way of teaching kids to read, and they're trying to address the low literacy rate in Tennessee schools. And it may be a great way to teach kids to read. I mean, I don't know. I've heard some things about the company, about privatization and all that. But really, at the end of the day, I'm trying to keep this focused on just the optics of Penny Schwinn handing $16 million to a company that just hired her husband. I mean, you just can't get away from that. That shouldn't be a partisan issue. And there have been Republicans who had issues with that also. I see Gapper X, who was, saying they undocumented immigrants do not pay income taxes. They pay local sales tax only. We don't have a state income tax in Tennessee, so we don't pay state income tax either. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're talking about that. And then let's see, a couple more things. There was this from Tucker Carlson. I just find him to be really a garbage human on so many levels. And this was him talking about how getting COVID feminizes people, using feminize as in a derogatory way. And, basically saying that Boris Johnson became somehow weaker because he had COVID.
I just be interested in getting your take on this, that getting COVID emasculated him. It changed him. It feminized him. It weakened him as a man. Do you think that's...
Well, I think he was very seriously ill.
Oh, for sure he was.
And I think, one of the things we have learned from COVID.
I mean, just first of all, the idea that like, you're equating feminizing with weakness and emasculation. And, he then goes on to talk about taking away life force. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but the women in my life are very strong and have very strong life forces. I've never met Tucker Carlson, but I can promise you their life forces are stronger than his. And this idea that like, this is how you see things, like weakness, women, like it's just such an ugly way of going about it. And yes, as my dad's coming on here to point out, Trump had COVID. So you're basically sliming your own God by framing things this way. And it's just such an immature and childish way of going about something. It obviously has no bearing on anything. Plenty of, men, women, all kinds of people have had this. And it's just such a empty way of viewing things. It brings no insight to the table. Nigel Farage here, who is a pretty extreme right-wing guy himself, like wouldn't even go with him on that, saying, well, he was pretty sick, and it just goes to show like how much disdain, Fox News itself and Tucker have for women, that they're all about preserving the patriarchy, preserving the status quo, the way women have been treated. And, it really echoes with, and I won't play the rest of this clip. You get the point. It really echoes with the other Fox News clip that I have here, which is Biden added that, basically all women and men are created equal when he was talking about Declaration of Independence. And, he intentionally added women because it says all men.
Self-evident that all women and men are created equal. And
I mean, that is a pretty mild addition. I think everybody would agree that women and men are created equal at this point. Maybe not at Fox, though. And even the women at Fox appear to have an issue with this. So this was on a show hosted by Tammy Bruce, and she took issue with it.
Endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Democracy doesn't happen by accident. We have to renew it with each generation.
All righty. Notice how he added women and men are created equal, not just men. It matters, right? That's not what the founders wrote. Apparently, the sacred words of our founders weren't inclusive enough for Sleepy Joe.
No, Tammy, they weren't inclusive enough. I mean, like, are you really arguing that the Declaration of Independence was inclusive enough? You know, we had slavery when this thing was written. You know, yes, it's not inclusive enough. And yes, we did need to amend it a number of times. That's what the amendments are. And so, like, this idea that, you know, we can't change anything they said is just ridiculous. And they don't even believe that, you know? It's just wild to see even the women at Fox News trying to, you know, preserve this flawed notion of perfection that a very chauvinistic and racist culture maintained at the time. You know, it's just wild. So I just want to bring that up. Tucker, Tammy, the whole Fox News crew really dragging us backwards when we need to be moving forwards. And I do want to point out that that clip was of Joe Biden at a democracy summit where he and Kamala had a lot of powerful things to say about democracy and preserving democracy and how it's the foundation of our country and how it's at risk right now. And they're right about that, but they don't seem to be willing to make it a priority to end the filibuster, to pressure Manchin and Sinema to protect our country the way we need to right now. You know, they seem to be operating out of a place of fear and deference to people who don't seem to understand the emergency that we're in. And every day we hear another story about how they are teeing up for another attack on our country for, you know, it doesn't matter who you are, what office you're running for as a Republican. The only thing that matters right now to them is that you say the election was stolen and that you're willing to steal it next time. So, you know, there was an article in the Atlantic that the next coup has already begun. We see that PowerPoint that Meadows turned over to the Insurrection Committee that shows that they had a plan to overthrow our democracy, overthrow our country, undo the election. You know, that's their priority right now. Like, they are perfectly fine for us not to be a democracy as long as their guy wins. And that's what we're dealing with. And it's a lot of people in the Republican Party that would happily undo the last election and install their guy. And that's where we are. Gapper X is saying, why do you hate gay people, dude? She's a lesbian. Like, comments like that just made me want to block you. Like, that's just dumb. You know, obviously has nothing to do with her being a lesbian. And that's just makes me want to ignore you now. Like, if you want to come here and have a conversation, we have our buddy Carlos who comes here sometimes and wants to talk about this stuff. That's fine. But comments like that, I mean, that's just useless and boring. So don't come here and be useless and boring. If you're going to come here, try to contribute something to the conversation. Thank you for joining us. We'll come back next week. I hope you all have a great weekend and really appreciate you being here. As always, follow all the hollers throughout the state. Check out the year in review video that we just put out there. Just really shows how much has happened and how, you know, far we have to go. Tennessee is in the hands of radical extremists, and that video really shows it. So we got to keep pushing to make this state a better place, and hopefully we can do that with your help. Thank you so much. Talk to you next week.